Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Welcome back to another episode of Extrology, listeners. Today, we're diving into a story that's bound to give you a sense of hope and inspiration. Our guest, Dr. Craig Thayer, had his life mapped out in the most unexpected of ways before he was even born. Adopted at 9 months, he battled an undiagnosed reading disorder, coped with heartbreaking family challenges, and overcame countless obstacles. But nothing could mute the deep calling he felt to become a surgeon. A calling that has led him to become not just a respected head of trauma, but also a community leader, motivational speaker, and best-selling author. Craig is passionate about sharing his journey to inspire us all to live life to the fullest. His memoir, Saved, one trauma surgeon's true accounts of the miracles in his life, offers a front row seat to his inspiring story. So sit tight, you're not going to want to miss this. What's the story behind the story? Without further ado, let's get into it. Dr. Craig Thayer, welcome to Extrology. It's a pleasure to have you here as my guest today, and I'm really looking forward to talking about what is a fascinating life and a wonderful journey on which you found yourself, and obviously spending a lot of time talking about, or certainly a proportion of our time talking about your wonderful book, which we'll come on to in due course. But I wonder if we might start, for context really for listeners, with the early days. And your story begins with being adopted at just 9 months old. And I wonder as to how that has perhaps shaped your early years and therefore your view on family.
Yeah, in a big way. And as you get older, you look more retrospectively. And I think I would have kind of began the story of my life with being adopted. One of the requirements was being raised Catholic. My mother, who raised me, was born in Ireland and came over to America when she was 21. Met my dad, couldn't have kids, and then they adopted me. I spent 9 months. Back then, in the 60s, there wasn't foster homes. It was in an orphanage. And but it's interesting. So now, a stronger Christian than I was back then. I'd say I was a believer, but not a follower. Now I'm obviously a follower with the book, with medical mission trips, so on and so forth. It really began before I was even born. God knew me. He knitted me in the womb, has a plan for me, a purpose for my life. And I can see that now. Again, retrospectively, you just see the miracles in your life, which is the nature of the book. It's just a story of my life where I can see these miracles that happened to get me to where I am today. And definitely family. Every Mother's Day I say, man, I was blessed to have 2 mothers.
Yeah.
I had one that was courageous enough to start showing in Michigan, and the church would have shunned her back then. So she moved to California and stayed in Monterey with a friend, and then had me for 10 days, had me baptized in a church in Monterey. I don't know what name she gave me, but she had to give me some name. I've always been curious about that, but I've left messages to the church to see if they had records, and I haven't got any answers back. But yeah, family. And then, just the adversity in my life. You lose your mom when you're a freshman in college, and then your dad over, 6-7 months with lung cancer that metastasized to his spine and paralyzed him at the end. And you learn your parents aren't immortal, and then you learn you're not immortal when you lose the second one. So definitely, and other stories in the book, a good friend that had before I even knew he was my friend, it was like he had a horrible car accident, ruptured spleen, broken pelvis, traumatic brain injury. He was dying from a ruptured spleen. So I took out his spleen, and 20 years later, he dies from that spleen being gone because it's part of your immune system. So you're prone to strep, which can kill you, and it did. He took too long to get into the ER with a sore throat, and so that chapter is called Time. I think that's our most precious, not commodity, but thing that we have. and it needs to be respected. And every day, I think of my parents gone and what they did for me, gratitude and thankfulness. And, I realize that's, I got two sons that are 15 and 17. One's about to go to college. I've got three others that already have gone to college and are working. So, you start to see these kids grow and leave, and it's not easy.
Do you recall? I'm fascinated. I think we live in a time whereby we're perhaps more encouraged to talk about things, our challenges, our struggles, things that we've had to overcome, traumas, whatever that might be. As not to say that that's easy, but at least we're in an environment where there is do I talk selfishly from a UK perspective? I imagine the US is similar, whereby we're encouraged to share. And the value of doing so is well documented. But perhaps I'd imagine that at a time at which your mother and your adoptive mother, there was certainly of an era whereby talking about many things would have been people more inclined not to discuss, I sense, things in many ways. So I guess why I asked the question, albeit somewhat awkwardly, I'm stumbling through it, but I just wondered was there a time at which you were sat down and made aware as to the adoptive nature of your upbringing, or were you old enough 9 months when you first adopted? So how did it all play out? How did you find out? I guess is my point.
So my parents told me probably when I was 5, you really don't have much of a memory before then, but it was never a secret. They were completely open about it. If I ever wanted to go find them, they were fine. My wife is like a private investigator. She's a data analyst by nature, but she's just been a paralegal. She's done a lot of stuff in life, and she wanted to know kind of where I got these I look in my, Polynesian and my part Asian. I was even invited to be in the Asian club in high school. So, and I'm not. I am West Asian. It turns out I finally did one of those genetic tests. But and my grandfather was the attorney that did the adoption. So I had full names and birth dates, and she was techie enough to find my natural mother's family first, and connected me with one of my natural sisters. And I've been back for family reunions on both sides. My natural mother I never met. She passed away probably 4 or 5 years before we found the family. But you're right, she never told. This is how private it was. She was it's sad to me, but when she was dying, she didn't want to take her last rites because she felt guilty about, giving me up for adoption. And then she always had this calendar, this one sheet of paper in her closet for August. And on the 6th, which is my birthday, she had, baby boy Monterey. So she idolized my birth and always remembered me. And someone told me once, you know what? When your natural mother thinks of you, every year on Mother's Day, any mom that's given up a child for adoption thinks of that child on Mother's Day. And I've always carried that. So on Mother's Day, I've always honored both. And, and she never told. So I had 2 sisters and a brother. Brother was raised as the oldest son, and so I made contact with the oldest sister, who was still younger than me by a few years. And then I'm like, I can't reach out to the other ones because, here's Jerry is his name. He was raised the oldest son. You're going to lose that title. I'm like, I can't take that away from him. So about a couple of years, they found out that I'd made contact with their sister, and then they reached out, sent me a letter around Christmas time, and I called, and since then we've been in communication. Yeah, gone to weddings and all those good things. So great bro and great sisters. So, and then dad's side, same thing. I think it was similar. He just didn't even know. And so the final link to that side of the family was through Facebook. My wife found a stepsister. He'd remarried a couple times, only ever had daughters, had no idea what he had or if I was alive. And I don't think my natural mother even considered that other option. So on the phone, talking through the stepsister, she's thinking it's a scam. I'm looking for something. And I had a picture from my natural mother's side of the 2 of them on a couch, and just a profile of my natural father. And he looked kind of like the Fonzarelli from, Happy Days, his leather coat and motorcycle jacket and such. But yeah, and I mean, they're like ready to hang up. And I look at the back of this one photograph, which is them at a wedding. I said, "Do you know Mary and the people who were in the wedding?" "Oh, yeah, we were at their wedding." And I go, "Okay, I got the right guy." And so then I said, "How do you tell a family member about, was there something in the 60s that happened that was kind of crazy for you? You know, you don't know what this new wife's going to think." And I think he was totally honest with them, that, because I think that was his second wife. So, but yeah, so then I just said, "Hey, I think I'm your brother, and I'd love to talk to him." And so he got on, and he said, "I just gave her some money to take care of it, and I never know what happened." So he was like, and apparently I've been told by the sisters in that side of the family that he never stopped talking about having a son. So he was really proud to have a son, and then to know what it had become of me. So pretty amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, the trauma and personal tragedy, you are 18 years old, your adoptive mother's passed away,
Right.
Your adopted father passes away imminently, almost immediately afterwards, 6-7 months, I think you alluded to.
Yeah.
You then had, you had a fractured skull in college, as I recall.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of adversity at respectfully, a really pivotal age in life.
Absolutely.
I mean, how do you think those experiences have molded your resilience and perhaps your perspective on life?
So back then, I would say that those experiences were purposeful in my life to make me a better doctor. To have experienced a death of your mom, to understand what that is in a family, to go through that experience made me more empathic to patients and to people. And then to crack my own skull, God knocking sense in my head, and having spinal fluid coming out of it, and then being stuck in the healthcare center for 2 weeks. And this was at UC Davis, so it's a quarter system. It's 10 weeks and then finals. So by 2.5 weeks, you're taking your first midterm. By 5 to 6 weeks, you're taking your second, and then you take your final, which is cumulative. So it's not only what you just learned, but then the whole year.
So this is the pivotal, the critical point of your studies as well, that you're dealing with a fractured skull.
Right. So, and I can't hear out of one of those ears. So
Goodness.
Someone would yell at me, and my stereo sound was horrible. I'm like, where'd that come from? I have no idea. Until the eardrum grows back. And then, and again, 2 weeks. And that quarter, I'm taking organic chemistry, organic chem lab. These are all like the hurdles in college. And it's kind of funny because in the United States, there was a group of med students that sued the university for too hard of an exam. I'm like, guys, this is your test. This is a hurdle you have to, it's a rite of passage. You've got to get through organic chemistry. And if you don't do it in series, like 128A, 128B next quarter, and 128C, and you're off, it's easier that way because you're not, all the pre-dental, pre-med, pre-vet, pre-law students are taking that in series to show their ability to learn and their prowess in their brain. So if I lost that, I wouldn't have graduated in 4 years. So my freshman year, when my mom dies and I go back for a week, I was on an all-male dorm floor. They're like, he'll never come back. He won't finish. And I didn't hear that till the next year. I just came back and finished. The sophomore year, I'm in a health center for two weeks, unable to take tests, to be in class, just reading the books, seeing what chapters they were on, and trying to keep up, and shouldn't have made it. I had 18 units. I dropped 2, so 16, and that's like, and there were a lot of labs. Every lab's 4 hours long, so plus the write-ups. I think I did a calculation in the book. It was like, 100 hours a week or something like that. But, and then junior year, my dad having lung cancer and being admitted with a chest full of blood, and that's when they made the diagnosis. And then this miraculous phone line, and it was an off-campus dorm that year with in a suite with 4 other people. And there was a old school phone jack that you had to plug your phone in, and long distance charges. And there was never a charge to the room. And I checked with the office. There was never charge to the whole system of the dorm place. So it was I could call them every day for free. So, and then, senior year, I'm on my own. They're gone. So I had one relative left. That was my grandmother, who was the one that for 15 years said, you need to write this book so you can, inspire people and, just relate. We all belong. We're all the same. We all bleed the same.
At what point do you recall first taking an interest in medicine?
Junior year in high school. So one, I just knew I liked to help people and teach, and I like working with my hands. So when junior year, I took an anatomy physiology class, and the human body was amazing. Interestingly, I wrote a paper on the eye, which is one of the things Darwin couldn't explain in his book, Evolution of Species, because it's just there. Suddenly there's no evolution. It's just eyeballs in everybody. So
that's a really good point. I never thought of it quite like that before, but
yeah.
How utterly correct that is.
Well, and how amazing, because God is the light, right? So
yeah,
what does your eyeball do? It sees light. So it's his creation. It's another, Strobel evidence-based thing. So the guy who both wrote the Chicago Tribune guy who wrote a book on the proving Christ existed, etc. So,
do you know? I, as an aside, sorry to jump in, but I'm fascinated. And it's just taken me down a path I hadn't considered. But
yeah, that's okay.
I'm sat here thinking, right, every element of evolution, as I remember studying it quite some time ago, made logical sense to me. But at no point do I ever remember anybody ever mentioning the eyes.
Right. Yeah, and nor did Darwin. He just, or no, I'm sorry, he did. But the one thing he didn't do was, let's just say we did evolve, right, from elements like hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and then somehow those form molecules. Then molecules form structures like proteins or DNA, double helixes. Well, our experiments, the first group that tried to create the environment of the Earth back then got amino acids, so building blocks of proteins, no RNA, no DNA. And then more recently, I think in the 80s, they tried it again and they got RNA. But again, we've never made a DNA molecule other than using the printer, the cell, and the ribosome. That takes DNA, unwinds it in the nucleus, transfer RNA, carries, 3 codes with an amino acid attached to it to the ribosome, and then makes a protein out of that. So which is chicken and egg? Which came first, the DNA strand or the strand in the whole complex that made it? Right. So
goodness, we could do this. Is a whole podcast in and of itself.
Yeah, totally.
So you were hooked. You're studying anatomy, wrote a paper on eyes, and this has sparked ignited a flame in you, a calling. I think I read you described it as you felt it in your heart. This is your path. This is what you've been chosen to do.
And I was cocky back then, so I thought, the really sexy surgeons were cardiac, the chest cutter, heart guy, or the neurosurgeon. But then in med school, I did a couple things that showed, neurosurgery is not that exciting. It's just a long time under a microscope. No, thank you. And then I did a 5-week acting internship with cardiothoracic guys. And I mean, they're technicians and their work ethic are amazing. In a second, whatever they're doing, they drop and they're there to save someone's life and bypass their heart. But most of them will only do, bypasses and valves. And unless you're pediatrics, then you have a whole bunch of different things you get to do. But so then another experience was at a VA hospital, Veterans Administration Hospital, where the vets get treated after they're being, service to the American Army, Navy, etc. And this guy had a lung cancer, and it started to bleed into his lungs, and he was basically drowning. And the internists didn't know how to put a tube in his trachea, and they didn't know how to do tracheostomy, and this surgical resident was in the OR. So this guy drowned, and I go, I need to do a specialty that can do anything to save someone's life, and that was general surgery. So back then we got trained from head to toe, how to do a burr hole for a big clot in someone's brain, how to open a chest and put a finger in someone's heart that's got a hole from a gunshot wound or a car accident, ruptured spleen, or take care of, ruptured, broken pelvises. And so that was the sport that I wanted to do. And we have to do 12 weeks of that in our med school training. And everybody loves it because it's just so rewarding. But the time, I worked a 160-hour week, several times. That's like 4 hours off for the whole week. So, but I loved it. I mean, it just was like, I couldn't get enough.
Why? What did you love about it?
Just I guess, they call us first responders now because of COVID. And I would not stand in a church or say, the guys that serve downrange and they put their own life in some way, in the crosshairs of someone else's target. Those are first responders, the firefighters, the police, the military people. My adrenaline comes from putting someone else's life in my hands. I have that responsibility to keep them alive. So it's not me necessarily at risk. Yeah, I could get HIV from exposure to blood. Something splashes in my eyes, or I have an open cut in a finger or something that gets through a glove. But I don't look at it that way. It's the opposite. It's my adrenaline that you hear the Green Berets or the SEAL Team 6. It's the excitement is they're putting their life on the line and getting over that, or not being able to have that adrenaline rush anymore. It's really hard for them once they retire and don't work. They usually become consultants and do stuff for years, and then when they figure they're too old to do stuff, they'll retire. But yeah, but it's not my life on the line. It's someone else's that feeds my adrenaline.
For your journey it's hard enough to, and rightly, the standards that you've alluded to from a study perspective, I think to become a surgeon is, it's well documented, and you want, rightly, I think you want to put your life in somebody's hands that's well qualified to do so. But it's never easy, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make. But for you, there were some other challenges, obstacles to overcome, I'd imagine, given what I know of your some of the other challenges that you were facing with from an educational perspective, not least of, I think, if I'm right in saying you were, well, let me ask you, what was the challenge for you? Let's share that with listeners, if we may. Something that took you to 55 to be diagnosed, is that correct?
Yeah. Well, my youngest son was struggling in school, and not educationally per se, but he would get done with a public school task in like a minute and a half, 3 minutes, that they would have a half hour. So he would be the class comedian and get in trouble, get sent to the principal's office. It was starting to affect his ego and his sense of, well-being. And we had him tested, and along with his older brother, who's a year and a half older. They're both ADHD, and then he has dyslexia. And so I would read the symptoms, and I would go, skip lines, you read backwards, you miss spell thing. And I realized I have dyslexia, which makes sense because 3rd grade, I walk into the class and it's dimly lit. And there's a projector in the middle of the room that has words up there, kind of like the beginning of every Star Wars, long time ago, far away. And you got to keep up with that pace. So the first 4 girls go, and I realized they're calculating how many words per minute you're reading. And so now I'm starting to sweat. And I know I just can't. Since probably 1st grade, Craig needs to read more. Because my speed was horrible. And that's why. And since that day, so I get up there, I fumble around, and the next week I'm out of that 3rd grade class with all the smart kids, and then the other one with the less smart kids, or at least they think that. So every test since that point, including now, I take multiple tests every year for continuing medical education. And I look at the number and the amount of time and come up with how many seconds I have per question. And I worry more about that test, completing it, than I do, so it's totally distracting. And, but I've just never thought of it as a disability. It's just like, it's a challenge, and I have to overcome it.
It's that sense of, those to whom we'd attribute a modicum of success, whether that's commercially, lots of sports, celebrity, whatever measure you might want to apply. There are countless examples of people who've succeeded and achieved phenomenal things.
Yes.
With having to overcome the challenge of dyslexia. And I just think it's a way of looking at life, looking at things, reading things differently. which I think is more of a slight, and I'm certainly not going to do teachers down because they do an incredible job. It's more around those that construct our way of educating people around this kind of sense of one size fits all, which actually, I mean, it's a huge obstacle to have overcome. I'm fascinated that you managed to succeed to the degree that you have through your examinations that you would have had to have passed to become a surgeon,
right? Yeah.
Despite all of these challenges and obstacles. I mean, they're countless. It's almost somebody's, and I take my hat off to you, Craig. What strikes me is that there are many people, given the sheer number of incredibly challenging, utterly traumatic scenarios that have been presented to you, situations in which you found yourself. And yet every step of the way, and I'm sure there have been times when you've, maybe there haven't, when you've questioned this, but every step of the way you've gone, no, I'm just going to climb over that one and I'll keep going.
Yeah.
Why? What is it that I mean, it's incredible and a real, I commend you. I take my hat off to you for all that you've achieved. But
yeah.
I'm fascinated to understand why. What drives you?
I think part of it's pride, to be honest, to not admit defeat, to look like a failure. I lose my mom, then my dad, and, classmates, friends, family friends, I'm sure in the back of their head are saying, doomed,
Well, I think you made mention they didn't expect you to come back, did they, from your college? So he's not going to return. And
yeah, so that pride
you've proven a lot of people wrong, right?
Yes. Yeah, that pride of proving them wrong, yeah. So, and even today you face challenges. Moving from California to Georgia was a feat, and my wife and I swore, because we watched a couple other people move, and one was a fire captain. He had 6 more months to finish to get his retirement, and so they were separated for 6 months, and my wife and I said, we'll never do that. And sure enough, a glitch in getting licensing and stuff out of California to Georgia happened, and I ended up staying there with my kids, which is a blessing, and then also be there with my grandmother for her death, the last 2 weeks of living in the house with her, and just being there to, she wanted and needed me there. So God made it so. And that wouldn't have happened if I was still doing surgery in California and busy all the time, 7 days a week. And so, yeah, it's just, and then it's a passion. I would say to people, find your gifts. For me, it was healing, teaching, and empathy. And then find something that you can use all those in. That's a passion that you really like doing. And you won't fail. Just never give up. There's another hurdle. And I forget what book it was in. It may have been John Maxwell talking about leadership, but everybody kind of has their number of hurdles that they're willing to go through before they say this is a challenge. And I don't think I could do it. Some people, it's just one hurdle. They'll just say, nope, can't do it. I'm just not going to even try. But others, it's several. And when it is several, then why do you get excited about one or two, which is our human nature? Like, okay, it's irritating and you get angry. Like, why do I need, and then you just go, well, look, this is only two things. let's just get that out of the way and then I'll be over it. So yeah, I think if you look at life that way, it's a lot easier. Kind of like that, man, I don't know why it just came to my head, but the story about the two mountaineering guys that were on K2, and one guy falls down a crevice, and they always make a pact beforehand. Look, one of us we're going to leave you behind, and that guy did. And sure enough, I mean, his mindset was, I'm going to crawl one step at a time, with a broken pelvis and all that he had messed up orthopedically. He just one pull at a time.
Was that Touching the Void?
I think so, yeah.
It is, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. But just take it one hurdle at a time. One pull, next pull, and then by the time, before you know it, you're there.
What does success mean to you?
That's a good question. I don't think, to me, it's not, I get raised on an artificial pedestal, which I can cheat and use an advantage to try and speak in front of people and groups and motivate and teach and do those things. But I tell you, I think success is relationships. I think it's, the more you've helped and served people is being successful. Acts of kindness, just out of nowhere. Like one of the favorite things I love to do is buy the person behind me in the line of cars a Starbucks coffee or whatever they've purchased, because they've already purchased it, right? I go, I want to pay for the person. It could be $100. They may have just bought all this food and coffee for the office, and you're like, oh, okay. Well, but they'll never know who did it. I mean, they'll know the car in front of them did, but I don't want them to know. Anonymously is the best way to give things.
And you, incredibly selfless that you are, you also give much of your time. You're a medical missionary.
Right.
So for the benefit of those that don't know, what does that entail? What do you do?
Well, I've been incredibly blessed and lucky that I found through the church we were going through. Actually, I think when I became a follower was when my oldest daughter was playing volleyball with a group of girls in a club team, and they would go to this one church, and the pastor there was a ex-professor at Santa Clara University in California. So he would bring up the context of the history and of whatever he was studying or preaching on that day. And so the first mission trip I went on with that church was to Honduras. And they had paved the way, this family in Pennsylvania, husband and wife. He was a maxillofacial, I mean, talk about crazy. You do your 4 years of med school, you do an ear, nose, and throat residency. Then you go back and do dental school. And then you do all this, you cleft palates and cleft lips and all this facial stuff that, it takes a long time to learn how to do. He sold his Ferrari and they bought the end of this clinic. So the front of the building is like a urgent care outpatient type thing. The middle of it's a birthing center. And then the very end was they converted to an OR. So I got to use my skills for outpatient surgery. So it began with just lumps and bumps. What is that TV series? The Pimple Popper or something like that. So that kind of stuff.
You have a YouTube channel, right?
Yeah. Every once in a while you'll find a bot fly or something unusual that'll crawl at you. So it's a little more exciting in a third world country. But, or just neglected medicine. And I saw this guy who, on his ring finger, he was they get around in the back of these Toyota trucks that have this metal cage that they can stand up in. So there can be 30 guys in the back of this Toyota small, truck. And somehow he got the ring caught as he was jumping off, and it basically just degloved the end of his ring finger. So he had the first part of his finger still covered with skin and half of the next bone. Yeah, it looked like, I have a crazy picture of it. And I always warn my wife when I go, because we have a shared iPhone account. And so the pictures I take, she'll see. And I'm like, don't look at this. So one night there was like a machete victim that was dropped off at the urgent care, and they'll run over and say, hey, can you help us? And that guy was pretty sad, but we did. And we got him shipped off to Guatemala because we're only like 8 kilometers from Guatemala. So hopefully he lived. We never got follow-up. But you just see some really bizarre stuff. And then it became hernias and gallbladder. So I did the last 2 trips. I've done 48 surgeries in 4.5 days.
Goodness.
That's like a third of what I do in America for the year in 4.5 days. So it was 44 hernias and 4 laparoscopic gallbladders.
I'm stunned.
Yeah.
Which is not a good look. It's not a good look for audio. It doesn't really translate to a podcast platform. No one can see the look on my face, but that's incredible.
Yeah. So and on these trips, there are pictures that I've included in the book of these crazy miracles. Like one year they put a microphone in my hand and got me on stage, and they asked me, what do you want the church to pray for? And I said, don't pray for our protection. God's got us. But pray that God unequivocally shows his presence to us, the group going, and to the Hondurans. And there were 2 photographs that were taken. One, I was in a closet, so the only light in the room is to my left across from me, and I'm in the shade of a 4-drawer metal cream-colored filing cabinet, and there's a almost clear trash bag hanging off of it, and there's a light. It's actually on the cover of the book, but there's a little label that says that's right over where that would be. So But in the book, it's a black and white photo, and there's this light coming out of the bag, and it's on. It's my left of my face is not shaded. It should be. So you can't explain that. And then same trip, different camera. This other camera was color. There's a picture of me standing there, and there's just a strip of skin through a paper drape that's got this aura, a light over it, and that is enveloping my hands. You can't explain it. No one can. My wife's brother is a virtual reality game designer, and he does mapping and contrast and light, and he says that's impossible. I go, well, there it is. Can't explain it.
What do you take from that personally?
So a few people have told me that, God can anoint people, and I think he anointed my hands. That's a gift. It has nothing to do with me. It's just God through me, right? So, which is kind of the story of the book. It's like, it's God through me. The fact that I'm here today, was adopted by great parents, and then trained to be an empath by my mom, and then continued with their deaths. And just, it just made me a better healer and someone that can serve and help people.
You're a community leader as well, as I understand.
Yes.
What are perhaps some of the inspiring stories of courageous leadership that you've seen with others that perhaps you would share?
Yeah, I think my leadership is I'm a strong team person. So, and the reason why I lead that way is kind of like the military. I'm not going to ask someone to do something I can't do myself. That's not always true. I mean, there's IT things that I can't do. So, but I'll ask someone to fix this, please. But when you're a team, think of football, American football, or soccer. Let's just take football overall for the world. When someone misses a head, the headshot into the goal, they feel horrible because they let down the team. And when you lead that way as a team, you know that everybody is equally important. That like I can't do surgery without a team. I mean, there's someone that's got to clean the room. There's someone that's got to hand me the instruments. There's got to be someone who retracts sometimes. There's got to be an anesthesiologist that puts these people under anesthesia. So I can't do it without any of those people. So, and if I fail, I let them down as well. So there's a story in the book about, there's many miracles in that trip. It was at a hospital in Tella. Clock stopped at 7/7 on the 7th day of the month after a miraculous gallbladder surgery that should have never happened because there wasn't any gas in the tank to inflate the belly. And the scrub, I always used, when I go to Copan, I use a friend of mine, Jason, who would retract and help. And I figured he'd do the same thing here in Tella, but I realized, oh my gosh, there's a circulating nurse that's Honduran. He's proctoring us. He's seeing how we do it. If we fail in the first case, we're out of there for the rest of the week. And I realized there's no way Jason can scrub this case. He's got to wear a full gown, cap, mask. He's got to set up the instruments. He's got to help drape with me. We're failing. And so we're outside, and I look at the other person that's there with me, and Leah, I go, what do you do, Leah? She says, well, I'm a scrub nurse for a cardiothoracic group. I go, okay, thank you, God, that you're here. And I look at her and I said, we're about to be proctored, and I couldn't do this without you. She started crying because she's never been, the cardiac guys, the prima donnas, so she's been treated horribly by most of those guys. And it never occurred to her that you're right. They can't do it without me setting all this stuff up. And then after she cried, I gave her a hug and said, okay, let's go do this. So we went in and did this miraculous case that should have never happened.
Do you think that's, my next question was going to be, what are some leadership lessons you've learned through your journey in medicine? But I think you've just evidenced that sense of teamwork,
yeah,
and a collective, cohesive whole.
Yeah.
Is that fair? Do you think that's the most important lesson from a leadership perspective you learned?
I think so. I think it's, being prideless and asking some of those members of the team that have more expertise in what you're trying to figure out to comment is key. I played water polo at an international level. Same thing. if I
That's
miss
a tough
shot,
game, right?
yeah, it's
Is a tough game.
It's rugby underwater, man.
Exactly.
You know rugby. So
I had a housemate at university who played water polo. He was fiery and feisty, and that's what he loved about it. There was a lot of physicality in a game that most people think they're just throwing a ball around in the water, right? How difficult can that be? It's brutal.
there's like no pads. Rugby. I mean, my oldest son played rugby, and I love the sport because it's very much like water polo. It's continuous. There's no stop and go like American football. But what I really love was the respect. And it's just not on the field. It's also off. I was with another buddy of mine who was on the water polo team when I played Masters in 2001 to 2007. We were in Vegas for his wife's daughter's 21st birthday. And we were at, I think it was New York. And they have this dueling piano thing that's really cool because it's audience participation. And we're standing there, and they had the sevens going on at the same time, the rugby sevens tournament. And this Australian team came over and said, "Hey, mates, we see that you're watching these ladies, these birds." And I'm like, because I had, an Irish mom, I can speak that language. And so could you tell us which ones are taken and which ones are not so that we don't step on any toes? That was so respectful. And but that you see that on the field, because at the end of the game, the team sits facing each other, and the front pick their favorite player on the opposite side, and the back line picks their favorite player, and they eat together. They celebrate. So I love rugby. Yeah.
Yeah, great games, and I think there's so many parallels, sport and life. That sense of teamwork that you've alluded to, your experience within medicine, leadership, humility, all of those sorts of qualities that actually ultimately lead to successful sports teams. So I think lots of parallels we could draw. They're well documented. But let's talk about this book, this wonderful book. You saved one trauma surgeon's true account of the miracles in his life. It's a bestseller. Why? What prompted you to write it?
So my grandmother and I would go to Sacramento Kings games, basketball, about 6 to 8 games a year. I'd take her out to dinner, and then we'd go to the game and take her back. Sometimes she'd bake me some chocolate chip cookies that I could take home, unless I finished them in the car on the way back. But she just said I needed to do this. And then I was at a Grant Cardone 10X leadership business stuff, not Christian or otherwise, but and there were probably like 4 people that I spoke to who had no idea who I was, and they said, you need to be on that stage, and you need to write your book. And then I was invited to my wife and another couple that we were with for this conference. We were at a restaurant and there was a guy up there playing blues blues guitar. He visited us at the table and invited us to go to drinks with his wife and some other people the next night. And his wife was going to the same conference we were going to. And one of the guys there was a realtor, and he was writing a book on basically realty. And so he said, look, this is the way to do it. You contact this editor, Hillary Jastrom, and then she'll hook you up with a recording thing you can do on your phone called Rev, R-E-V. And you just kind of dictate into it, and then it'll transcribe it for you in 5 to 10 minutes, and you can download that to Word. And then you can edit it. And then you realize how stupid you sound when you speak and what you missed and what you forgot. And so it's better to definitely edit it, write ad. But the thing I learned was the editor was key. Hillary was key, because I'll write things I know what I'm talking about. Like when I described the gallbladder surgery and how you have to do it and why the CO2 is important and how if it's not there, you can't do it. But she was there to read from a layperson's view of, hey, you need to describe this. I don't understand what you're saying here. So it's all my writing, and it's just anything that she added was clarification. So, and that took about 1.5 years to finally get all through it and published and all those things. So, and then I did a Facebook survey of, should I do an Audible? I mean, I feel I need to support my fellow dyslexic brethren, and they 100% said yes. And then I said, should I do it? And they were like, one friend said no. And So now, like you said, you got to experience my dyslexia right there when you read the title. That's the way it was if it was a long sentence, I would get a third of it, no problem. The next third I'd fumble and then have to start over. I'd get 2/3, and then the next third I'd like, who wrote this damn book? And of course it was me. So these long sentences would just drive me crazy, but I get through it. So, and I've listened to it because I had to, make sure it was edited right and that everything I could hear was what was in the book and so on and so forth. So I don't know. People will have to tell me. No one's told me whether they like the Audible I did or not, but I'm afraid to ask.
Did you was it your grandmother saying, you've a fabulous story, Craig, that this needs to be in a book? Or was it were you playing around with the idea of thinking, maybe I'll write a book? How did it what did the initial kind of nub of the idea stimulated it?
I probably brought it up.
Brought it up.
I think I brought it up. I go, I think, and she's like, yes, you need to do this. Yes.
Yeah.
When are you going to do this? And luckily, the last 3 months of her life, I was there every day visiting. And then she's a very, very private lady. She's the only adult that was there for high school graduation, college, med school, residency, first wife, 3 kids, second wife, 2 kids. And then, so she just got to read the first drafts of most of the chapters, and she would read it to her caregiver that was there that day. And so they were all excited about, getting to the next one. And so it was good. She got to read most of the book. The last 2 chapters, the last chapter, the reality is I couldn't have written it until she passed because I needed to include the final miracles that she left behind. Her clock. She died at 10:31. The clock, which was her favorite clock, there's a whole story about the clock, stopped 2 days later at 10:31. And then in the guest bathroom where I would shower and shave, there was a stool, and I'm looking down at that stool, and there's a book with her glasses on it and a bookmark. And I go, because she's touched this book, she's opened it, she's read it, these are her glasses. And the title was Gone Missing. She's gone missing.
There are many miracles you mentioned, you talk about. Is there one that really stands out for you the most?
Yeah, I think it's the one I alluded to in Tella. The case, the CO2 tank that didn't work, the people that were there to accomplish the task. That was incredible. The other surgeon from Honduras that helped show how they could have set up. It was clear to me that, because I didn't know how experienced he was, and they do like 6 years. That's their college, their med school, and their residency program. For me, it's 14. So I didn't want to insult them. But then when I realized that they didn't know how to hook up the cautery, the suction was to a shop vac. The TV is about the size of your laptop screen. In America, it's like a 36-inch HD, a huge screen, color. Theirs was color, luckily. And the CO2 tank was like one of those gigantic, 50-pound acetylene torch looking things, green. And so just, getting through that, the ability to realize he's not done very many of these, and it was an incredibly hard one. It's this lady, it's not like America where you have an attack of right upper quadrant abdominal pain after a fatty meal and you get your ultrasound and you've got stones and, okay, let's get this thing out because it's going to happen again. They've had it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And this lady I'm sure she had hepatitis because her liver was completely cirrhotic, which then when it gets so fibrotic that blood can't get through it, all these veins distend and are finding ways to go around the liver. And so this one structure in the belly called the omentum, it's just this big like fatty apron. It'll stick to things to keep it walled off so that it doesn't get spread through the entire abdomen. That thing was it was welded to her gallbladder and liver. So I had to get that off, and it's filled with these half-inch veins. So I got to teach him how to get out of, torrential bleeding. You don't have a blood bank there. So They pay, it's interesting, they pay for 2 things to be in this, to have the surgery. They pay for their drape kit. So all the drapes that you put on them, they pay for, and then they have to bring that. And then they pay like $100 for blood. That's never there. There's no blood bank in the hospital. So you get into trouble, it's like you need to stop the bleeding right away. So pressure's on. You feel a lot of pressure there. It's just you don't have all the safety nets that you have in America. And getting through that took like an hour and a half. That's why I turned around and looked at the clock to see how long it took. And I have a picture of the clock. It's 7 after 7 o'clock. That stopped on the 7th day of the month. I look at the tank, and the tank gauge says 0. I knew that initially when I got, it's stepwise. So you put the special needle into the belly while you pull up on the abdominal wall, and then you inflate it, and you need 15 millimeters of mercury. Well, it stopped at 12, and I look at the little device that gives you the pressure and whether there's flow of the CO2. There's no flow. So I go, is the valve closed on the CO2 tank? Guy goes over and checks. Nope, it's wide open. The valve's all. So I go, well, they're saying there's no gas. So I just basically prayed to myself, looked up, pressure was 15, and then I continued. And again, it was an hour and a half case, and I had to suction and irrigate. So every time you suction, you're taking some of the CO2 out. I never looked at that gauge again. I just always had a view. It was always inflated to where I needed to be able to see, and got through it. And then, so just the whole thing should have never happened. And then Leah being there, just crazy. And the clock.
One of the things that struck me was perhaps how hard it was to write the book, given not least the dyslexia to which we've referred, but also recalling some clearly painful events through your life. How hard was it to write?
Oh, yeah, it was horrible, to be honest with you. To have to go back over some, like the chapter I talk about how my mom was an alcoholic, behind my dad, my sister's behind me, open the front door, look in, she's laying there, her back's to us, she's naked on the ground, just asleep. And my dad pushes his back, closes the door, he puts her in bed and goes back and lets us in. My sister never saw that what was going on. So, but to have to recount those things, and then go into an AA meeting with her and the guy who stood in front of me looking at me like I'm a ghost, and turns out his story because he gives his testimony. He was drunk and he ran over a kid that looked exactly like me. So it's like going through my dad. It was he became paralyzed overnight, and he wet himself in the bed from no bladder control, and I had to carry him into the hospital. I'm being the empath. I'm looking at what the nurses must have thought. There's this 20-year-old kid carrying his dad in his arms into the hospital, who looks frail because he's been under chemo and radiation for his lung cancer. It's just, I can't imagine what that vision looked like to them.
It's an incredible story. You talk about pain to purpose, and I was interested to understand what perhaps that you meant by that.
I think we can play the victim, like a lot of what's going on today. It's bad to remain in the victim state, and I think America's doing that greatly. California wants, they went there, they're trying to come up with funding for, paying back the black culture for slavery in California. Well, there weren't any slaves in California. So, but there are, and I do agree. There's a red line. I've read a lot of racism books to better understand, put myself in that culture's shoes. And but if we remain in the victim mentality, we'll always be the victim, right? So at some point you got to come out of that. And so that's what I mean. You take the pain of what has been done to you or what you've gone through and make a purpose out of it. Use it for good. Make the cup half full. So for me, it was like I just said, it's horrible. Your mom's an alcoholic, but she didn't drink for the last 8-9 years of her life. She was a great mom, And so going to that AA meeting taught me about, being an empath. And it makes me and as I said earlier, it makes me a better doctor. It makes me a better person to help other people. And so taking those painful moments and publishing them, I think my wife's aunt said, her comment about the book was, that was really brave.
Yeah, it strikes me as such. And I know you're not doing it for that reason, but it does appear very brave to have done it.
Yeah. But
what do you think you sounds like a selfish question, you're not a selfish man. But nonetheless, what do you think you gained from writing the book?
what I hope I gained, so I feel like I'm going through this transition the last couple of years. I still operating, still want to. That's been my calling from junior year in high school. But I'm feeling a pull using the same gifts of healing, empathy, and teaching to get on stage and talk and to help people, to unite everybody. I mean, this world, it doesn't matter what, country we're in. You guys are going through the same things. I'm reading about what just got passed for media. Your government just said, we're going to monitor this and we'll shut it down if we feel something's inappropriate. Well, that's freedom of speech. That's our first amendment, right? So I know the parliament you guys have usually fixes those things, but the chance is there, and we're fighting for that in America. The libraries associations that are putting books in there that they want to promote, etc., or shutting down. I've seen a number of YouTubers that would speak. They use the word Jesus, and they were unfunded and demonetized, I guess is the word. So, yeah, I mean, that's the first thing. I used to do a lot of CrossFit training, and they created a physicians group, and there was moderated by a non-physician, but everybody else had to be. And that's important because then we could speak freely. Like, I forget the guy's name, but he was an epidemiologist out of Stanford that kind of got shut down about the whole COVID thing. And now he's, they're in a big lawsuit that I'm sure they'll win. That, the FBI, the CIA, the White House, the Department of Justice are not allowed to participate in any way with social media outlets like Twitter and Facebook, all those places. So they were manipulating back in the day. So yeah, I think I just feel that pulling that I need to get out there, whether it's a small group or, a huge platform of, thousands of people, either way, just to say, hey, look, we all belong. We're all part, we're a team. We need to pull together.
I am by nature a glass half full person, Craig. So I have to sometimes temper that perspective with, an understanding of reality.
Right,
But I am a great believer in the human spirit will prevail,
right,
and the good will come through.
Yes.
And I think that one of the things I'm hugely encouraged by, and I'm interested in your experience, is if you look at the echo chamber that is social media, it strikes me that the model relies upon extreme views, polarizing of views, to drive eyeballs and clicks and views and all these sorts of good things. That's not my experience. So we would oftentimes be led to believe that that's the world in which we exist, but that's not my experience of humanity. When I step outside of the realm, what I see, what I hear, what I experience are fundamentally decent, honest, genuine, authentic, likable, lovable, personable, decent human beings in abundance. So I think that it's very easy to, I don't know if that's your experience, but I have this hope that, as I say, that the human spirit will prevail, and that of the undeniably minority of bad actors on this mortal coil, the vast majority are fundamentally decent, and that will win. That will be what that. Hey, maybe that's a slightly rose-tinted perspective, but is that your perspective on? Is that your experience?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a stat that's always been crazy to me. So it only takes 7% of a group to be extremely vocal to make it seem like they're 51%. And now it's even less.
Wow.
I mean, transgenderism is 0.1% or even less of the population, but they're incredibly vocal, right? So, and I'm empathic to them. I mean, they're people that were created in God's image. They're beautiful people, right? So they need to be cared for. So, and heard. I think media, what you said is perfectly dead on. And I think part of that includes fear.
Yeah, fear. Absolutely. It's fueling fear.
Yeah, it fuels fear. I mean, you look at our elections.
We're the same here, by the way. Yeah. This is not a uniquely US experience. We're the same challenges.
Yeah. Because I love listening to the BBC stuff too. So I love British humor. Always have. I mean, there's just like, you don't worry about political correctness like we do.
No, we're also, in my experience, very good at laughing at ourselves.
Yeah.
Irony is we don't like it when other people laugh at us, but we're very good at laughing at ourselves.
Right. Well, I mean, look at Johnny Carson. He existed for 40 years in a highly political environment towards the end, right? I don't know what party he was associated with. And he always knew that entertainment was about entertaining, not trying to. So he would poke fun at anybody and everything, which is great because then you never know where he falls.
Yeah. But no, I think it's one of the things that I was intrigued by. You talk about your speaking experiences and the intersection of faith with your work and your personal life. How does faith intersect with your work and you've alluded to a lot of it through this, but I'm interested in how you'd summarize that kind of intersection between faith and work and life in general for you.
Yeah, that for a while that was a really difficult thing to explain. I mean, I've had nurses ask me, how can you have faith when you're a scientist? Because medicine's evidence-based, and if you're doing something that's not, then that's not. You shouldn't probably be doing it. There needs to be something that says that's okay. Although I will say, in the British Journal of Medicine, they published the proof of parachutes. It's just empiric that parachutes save lives. But they had this whole literature search, and hey, so there have been some people that have fallen 30,000 feet and lived. So why aren't we testing that? So
that's not something they're going to get me on board to do. I'm not volunteering for that assignment.
Yeah. It's got to be a controlled blind study. Yeah. That's, not retrospective. It's got to be prospective. Yeah.
I did a parachute jump for my son for his 16th birthday. It's a few years ago now, but yeah, I would do it again, but not for that kind of experiment. I'm afraid of heights, so it'd be tough. I'd probably have to be. I do a backpack trip every year, and I go, okay, when we have to go down something there's no trail, and you're just scrambling, I go, nope, make me go last. I may stay up here. Peer pressure, shove me down. Yeah. So, but I think there was one particular incident in my life that it gave me better understanding. So the scenario was 30-something-year-old father, wife in the front seat, 3 girls, 2 of them were twins, in the back in a SUV, had just had lunch. They're going up to Tahoe, so it's a windy road. There's a river next to it. He falls asleep, rolls his vehicle all the way down into the water on a cloudy, kind of drizzly day. There's a kayaker in the water who normally they don't kayak on those kind of days, but there was. He turns out he's the son of another surgeon. He goes over, he rescues the girls, get them out on the side of the car. That's the highest part out of the water. He sees a paramedic unit that drives by up above. So he makes sure that the wife holds the father who's unconscious head out of the water, because the seatbelt's the only thing that's holding them out of the water. And he's not totally there. He's had a head injury. He runs up the hill, and a CHP, California Highway Patrol officer, is just happening to be right behind that unit. He pulls over. He radios for help. That one unit turns around. Turns out they're a high water, rapid water rescue team that gets in the water, saves the girls, saves mom, cuts the guy out of the car, and then he's bringing the wife and one of the girls. One of the girls had a broken femur, and the other one had something else. So they get ambulance to a level 1 trauma center that's about a half hour away from us. And they're still probably an hour away from that hospital and a half hour from ours. And he comes in. She looks fine. He goes off to a CT scan. Head looks okay. He's got a mild traumatic brain injury. He's on a blood thinner for a weird genetic defect to keep his blood thin. Otherwise he'll clot and have strokes, heart attacks, or clots in his legs that can go up to his lungs. And he's got a broken pelvis. He has broken ribs and has ruptured his spleen, which is actively bleeding. He's got an open femur fracture. He has, just every part of his body's been broken.
his lungs have dropped on both sides, and now there's pressure, so it's not allowing the blood to return to his heart. So he needs tubes put into his chest to get the lungs re-expanded. And then he needs to be intubated so we can get him up, meaning someone put a tube in his trachea to breathe for him because he's starting to lose and not able to breathe. And then he needs his spleen taken out. And luckily, the crew was there, and we run him up, get his spleen out, bring him back, and then I check with my orthopedist to see if these injuries he can handle. And I'm like, part of me is like, hey, let's just get him transferred to the level 1. We've saved him this far. He's got a brain injury. He's got to be blood thin when I've just taken out his spleen. He can bleed from where I've operated. And now he's got a pelvis and he's got a femur. And unfortunately, the ortho guy, yeah, I can handle all those things. So I'm like, okay. So he stayed. And there was part of me, when he went to the ICU, I said, this guy has gone, there were so many miracles just to get him to me. Replace coincidences of luck with those are miracles, God's work, right? That we had a team there on a weekend that just came down, responded. We got his lungs reinflated, his airway handled, breathing for him. We got him up to the OR, saved him from bleeding to death. And I'm thinking, God's got him. I can just let go of the reins at this point, right? So, and then literally within a half a second I thought that, I get a page and call from the ICU. He's fighting the ventilator. A whole bunch of things are going crazy. And I go, oh, okay, God, thank you. You just handed the reins back to me in a 9 gravitational dive. So thank you for teaching me that, yep, you want me to do some more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that balance, because I've had patients go, well, it's your hands. If I cut into something that's going to bleed, it was you did that. I go, absolutely, yeah. And this one patient gave me this part. He goes, well, I trust God because I think he knows what you're going to do before you do it. And he knows that you can handle it. Right? So, yeah, if I do something that's not perfect, then I know how to fix it right away. I can't, I read a funny journal where I was like, surgery is not like, being an IT guy. I can't take stress time off or, in the middle of a surgery, just go, oh, I'm going to take a week off. You got to finish it. Yeah. So, yeah. But I'm there. I mean, I think people have asked me what's the longest time you've been in the operating room. It was like 36 hours. They go like, didn't you have to go to the bathroom or something? I go, no. Because as you're not drinking or eating, you're getting dehydrated. So
I'd imagine that 36 hours goes by in a heartbeat as well.
It does, yeah, because you save one thing. I was trained by a great trauma surgeon, Dr. Blaisdell, and he said, look, when you've got 4 life-threatening things, take care of the worst first. And then if they live through that, you go to the next. And you keep going as fast as you can. And if you can't get to all 4, then that's just the way it was.
Your passion, we've talked about from the get-go, is inspiring others to live life to the fullest. I think that's a fair summation. There's a lot more to it than that, but I think if I summarize, I might define it as such. What's the one piece of advice you'd offer someone who perhaps, as they're listening to this today, is facing their own challenges, their own adversity? What advice might you offer them to get through it?
So I'm Christian. I get to cheat. So I would say when the battle's bigger than you are, or what's the saying? God never gives you more than you can handle. Well, that's not true. He'll give you more than you handle, but you got to turn to him to handle the rest of it, right? So, and there's a million stories in the Old Testament, like Paul or Saul's son, Jonathan. They're about to battle the Philistines up in this mountainous area, and he decides he's going to take the one sword that's in the camp and go fight 30,000, I think it was, Philistines with his armor bearer. I'm like, and he won. I mean, God had him actually stopped with his armor bearer and said, hey, if the guys up above us say, go back, we'll go back. But if they call us up, we're going to go fight, and hopefully I'll kill somebody. You can grab their sword and then you can help. So, and that's what happened. I think he killed like 20 people right away, and then they all freaked out and they panicked. And because part of the Philistine army was other nations, they turned on themselves and mayhem. But yeah, so I would say battle bigger than you, turn to God. If you don't have a God and faith, I'm as a Christian, and I think this is a mistake that some Christians make, unfortunately, I'm not here to judge. We're all the same. We're all beautifully made. We have maybe demons on our back that we can't see, and so we're taunted by those. But if you don't have that faith, then it's going to be harder. It's going to be harder to get through that battle. But don't give up, because if you do, then what's the saying? Winners never lose and losers never win.
That's very true. Craig, it's been wonderful to spend time with you today and hear more of your fascinating story. And I think importantly, we need to share with listeners where they can go to find you and in particular, they can find your book to keep up with your journey. Where should we point listeners?
So the book is easy. It's on Amazon. So if you go Amazon, put my name, Craig Thayer, and just put saved, it should pull up the book for you. If you have any doubt or you want to reach out to me on any of my social media, I think the overall reference is my website, which is just craigthayer.net. And you'll find everything that I'm doing and all my, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all those things are listed. So you can get to me through those too.
Craig, it's been wonderful to meet you. I really appreciate you taking the time out to share your story with listeners here on Extrology. It's an incredible story. We barely scratched the surface. I have so much more I'd want to ask, but I'm conscious of your time.
Yeah.
But thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been great to spend time with you, and thank you for sharing.
Ditto, Lee. It's been an honor. So I appreciate you being here too. And if you ever want to have a part 2, just feel free to reach out to me. And,
I have a feeling we can make that happen. Fantastic. Great stuff. Thank you, Craig.
All right. Thank you, Lee.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to today's Extrology podcast. I really appreciate your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed it, then why not hop onto iTunes and give us a review? I'd really appreciate anything that you might have to say. Any feedback always gratefully received, and look forward to hosting you next time. See you soon. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.